Now that I've had the Mustang Mach-E for a few months, I have to say I like it more than I thought I would at the very beginning. But there is just one problem. If I had to pick one problem with the Mach-E, it would be the tires. The factory tires are a 225 width tire. They're not terribly wide. This is the kind of tire that you'd find on an up-level Honda Civic, not a Ford Mustang in my opinion. And they're Michelin Primacy all seasons. These are not overly grippy all-season tires. Also, the factory rims are not really capable of handling a tire that's much wider than this because they're relatively narrow in their own right. Now that makes a lot of sense because electric vehicles need as much efficiency as possible. And that's why Ford puts skinny tires on the base Mach-E. But remember, the Mach-E is pretty heavy. This is far and away the heaviest Mustang built in recent memory. And again, it's running on relatively skinny tires. So I decided to fix that. These tires aren't exactly fat, but they are now 245/50 R19. I chose these quite simply because they were on sale on TireRack.com. This video is not sponsored by anybody. I just happen to like Tire Rack, and you can find some really good deals if you hunt around for a while. These were just over $100 a tire for a Pirelli P0 summer tire. So not only are these tires wider, they're also grippier. As you might have guessed, wider tires meant needing wider wheels. These wheels are from a 2018 Lincoln MKZ. I chose these particular wheels because they have the right offset, the right bolt pattern, and they were relatively inexpensive. I ran a bit of a contest over at facebook.com/AlexNautos and of course over here in the YouTube comment section. These were the second pick by everybody, including me. I really liked the Volvo wheels better. A lot of people didn't really realize they were from a Volvo. They had a really cool spoke design. Rather unfortunately, they were about 5 times the price of these wheels, so I simply went with these right here. And I have to say, I think they look pretty good on the Mustang. Because what I was looking to do was a little bit more complicated than simply swapping tires on the factory rims, I ended up at Sprint Motorsports in San Jose. Again, this video is not sponsored by anybody. I'm just giving them a shout out because I really think that if you're going to do anything more complicated than simply swapping tires, this process did involve replacing the tire pressure sensors, moving them to the new wheels, making sure they fit. We also had to insert a 5mm spacer in order to clear the large brake rotors and the brake calipers up front. Anytime you're trying to do that sort of thing, I suggest going to a tuning shop, a company that specializes in aftermarket modifications of vehicles, because your average tire shop may not really have been that enthused about this particular swap. Even though these are OEM wheels from a different Ford product, logically they'll fit, and of course the bolts and everything else were checked out to make sure that everything was just as safe as possible. Upgraded tires, these happen to be the same size tire, basically in terms of width, that we'll find on the Ford Mustang Mach-E. So this video will also give you a bit of a window into the range that you can expect out of a 245 width tire. While I'm talking about Sprint Motorsports, I should also comment on their sister company that's in the same building, DIY or Die. This is a concept that I really love, and it's something that's sprouting up across the country. Hopefully I'll be able to have another video on this at some point in the future. But basically what they allow you to do is rent space in the shop. You can rent a lift, you can rent all their tools, they have mechanics that will help you for your own projects. I really love that particular concept. It looks like at the moment it's around $35 to $40 per hour to rent the lift, and most of the tools go with that particular price. So if you plan on mounting or balancing your own wheels or tires, you could do that in their shop. If you wanted to just change your oil, you could do that for $40 an hour if you wanted to make sure that it was done exactly right. Or if you had some big mod project on your next race car or whatever, you could do that in their shop as well. They'll also rent stalls by month, and they have some other plans, etc. It's a really cool concept. Big shout out to them for helping me. Again, not sponsored in any way, ended up having to pay the bill. With that out of the way, let's dive into the range impact. I'm gonna read this off the paper that I calculated everything on just so that I get everything right, because people are so picky when it comes to range numbers. Now, the last time I drove this Mach-E on the exact same range loop that I test every other vehicle on, this came in at 275 miles of estimated range. Now, with these wider wheels and wider tires on them, I ended up with 265. So basically, it ended up being about a 3 to 4% loss in range. Now remember that tires are not the biggest impact when it comes to a vehicle's range figure, especially in highway driving. That's going to be the general aerodynamics of the vehicle, the weight of the vehicle, all that other stuff is really going to factor in a bit more than the tire size. And that's exactly why a Tesla Model Y with 255 width tires is really so efficient. Even though it won't go quite as far in my testing as this Mach-E, it has a significantly smaller battery. Before February of this year, all Model Ys had a 75 kilowatt hour battery. Now they have an 82 kilowatt hour battery. Any way you slice it, there's less energy on board, but it will go almost as far as this Mach-E because it's quite a bit more efficient. That has to do with motor efficiency, inverter efficiency, battery efficiency, and aerodynamic efficiency. Outside of range, the tires also had a pretty big impact. The last time I 60-0 tested my own Mach-E was when it was absolutely brand new. It stopped from 60 miles an hour to 0 in 110 feet. However, over the time that I have had this vehicle and about 5,500 miles on the clock, that stopping distance has progressively stretched out due to probably the age of the tires, etc., things bedding in differently. At this point in time, with the original tires, my Mach-E took 125 feet to stop from 60 miles an hour to 0. Swapping in these summer tires dropped that back down to 109 feet, so I'm really happy with that. A little bit more important than that is the handling ability, however. Skid pad scores, I don't have access to a skid pad, but I do have access to perhaps a mall parking lot, which I shouldn't really talk about here on camera. I got an improvement of 0.05 Gs. That doesn't sound like too much, but that certainly is more sure-footed, and a 0.05 G improvement is no small difference. Perhaps more importantly than that is just the way that this grips the road when you apply the power. So if you're in a corner and you stab the throttle on your way out of the corner, the previous tires that the Mach-E had would certainly squeal. You definitely feel a little bit of shuffling as the vehicle struggled for traction. And now with these tires, you don't have that problem at all. It just grips and gets going. And that means that if you are planning on driving your Mach-E in a more spirited fashion, these are going to be way, way better than the OEM tires. That's one of the reasons I think that my range actually ended up being a little bit lower, is that when I took a look at the drive route that I was on, in the windy section of that drive route, I was driving quite a bit more aggressively than with the factory tires. It ended up taking me about 15 minutes less to drive through that country road section than in the previous test, and there really wasn't any difference in traffic. That area doesn't have any traffic at all. So it's simply that I was driving this Mach-E faster now than the last time that I was driving it with the regular tires on it. A lot of you had questions about ride quality post tire and wheel upgrade. This is the original wheel and tire from the Mach-E. You can see it's a 225 width tire that refers to the tread width. 19 refers to the wheel diameter right there. This is a 19-inch wheel, and sandwiched in the middle is the 55 number, 225 50 R19. That's the aspect ratio of the tire, and that aspect ratio part is important. It's not an absolute number. The new tire is a 245 50 R19, so the wheel size is exactly the same. The tread width got wider by 2 centimeters, that's nearly an inch. But the aspect ratio dropped because the width of the tire increased. The actual circumference of the tire is incredibly close. They're less than 0.5% off, so basically the same diameter. And that means that we have the same cushion of rubber between the wheel and the road. So ride quality is substantially similar to the OEM wheel and tire. Ride quality concerns are the big reason I did not get a 20-inch wheel and tire on my Mach-E. That's what you're going to find on the Mach-E GT coming up soon. I decided, however, to stick with a 19-inch wheel and tire because I knew that would fit on the vehicle in terms of clearance from the caliper, and I knew that I could get the tire that I was interested in that size. Now let's add up how much everything set me back. The 4 new tires ended up costing me $430 delivered. That was an incredible steal from Tire Rack. That particular deal is now gone, rather unfortunately. The wheels ended up averaging about $250 per wheel. They were all used wheels. I found them on eBay, a bunch of other wheel sites. I ended up buying one from one store, one from one store, one from one store, one from one store, etc. to get the whole set. Thankfully, they all matched. They'd all been refurbished, so they actually have a pretty good polish level on the front. The work done over at Sprint Motorsports did cost me more than your average tire shop. Definitely something to keep in mind. I ended up spending about $220 over with them. They mounted, they balanced, they dealt with the spacers, they dealt with the movement of the tire pressure monitoring sensors from one wheel to the other, new valve stems, etc. And then, of course, we remounted the tires on the old rims here. These have a lot of life left on them. They only have 5,000 miles, and these are pretty high mileage tires right here for these Michelin All Seasons. This means that I have a spare tire to take with me if I want a spare tire on a longer road trip, a spare tire at home if I perhaps need one there. I also have these tires that I can simply swap back on if I wanted to sell the vehicle, or if for some reason I just really cared about getting that extra 10 miles of range back. Keep in mind, the summer tire is not going to last nearly as long as these tires, so cost of operation is definitely going to go up. Not just because of the loss in efficiency, but because the tires are going to be a bit more expensive to keep around. Of course, if you live in the snow belt of America, then swapping out wheels and tires season to season is absolutely no big deal. They do it all the time up there. Another thing that you can get out of this video is that Ford's range estimates on the upcoming Mach-E GT seem totally rational, because I got 265 miles out of my vehicle with 245 width tires, same width tire that we're going to find on that Mach-E GT. And there's obviously some variation in my testing. It's going up and over a mountain pass, etc. It is absolutely plausible that with the summer tires on, you could exceed 270 miles of range if you're driving it carefully. So the Mach-E GT's upcoming rating of 270 miles and 260 miles if you get the performance option seems totally plausible to me, because the body of the vehicle has not changed. It's just as aerodynamic as the existing models that are on sale right now. Let me know what you think about everything down there in the comment section below. Find me over at facebook.com, Instagram, Twitter, all those other social places, and I'll see all of you next week.